the Apostle Paul often used the image of running a race to describe the Christian life. And it's an interesting image if you study it. You think of it, if you are going to run a race, it involves strength, it involves determination, and it certainly takes endurance. I'm always especially inspired by the Special Olympics, and to see the folks that, despite any type of physical challenge, are there, participating and competing as amazing athletes. So how we run our race really has a lot to do with our heart. It has a lot to do with our will. Whether or not we will be determined to run that race with perseverance. And if we want to be successful in our Christian lives, in our everyday life, and in our work, we need to have that kind of determination. Paul says that in a race many runners run, but only one gets the prize, and that's the one who comes in first. And then he admonishes us to run in such a way as to get the prize. So really in our race of life there's the one of us running. Each one of us has our own race. And there is a reward in this race that we run. And the wonderful thing about God is that everyone who completes their race, their own individual race, gets the prize. So that's great. You don't have to be concerned that, you have 2 million other people you're competing against. You are simply running that race with God. Greatest cheerleader you could have. Nowadays it's very popular to run in marathons. And many people enter a marathon or a bike-a-thon not necessarily to come first, but to finish. It's the challenge of participating. It's the personal challenge of completing that marathon. I know my cousin, I call him my nephew, but really he's my cousin's son, Mark, enters in all these marathons. And he just loves it. And, there's also marathons not just for the personal challenge, but that have a worthy purpose or a cause that is an extra incentive in that particular marathon. And I'm thinking of something like the Terry Fox Run, which raises money for cancer research. And again, it's not about how fast you were, it's about completing the race. It's about crossing the finish line. So the prize is for those that finish the course, especially in our Christian walk. It's not so much that you came in first, last, or somewhere in the middle. Like Jesus said, the last will be first, the first will be last. I mean, we don't need to worry about that. It's simply that we finish. It's not for competition. It's for the challenge and to run that race with joy. And that's what I would hope for myself personally, for my Christian life to be. Paul outlines what's involved in running a race. And of course, the first thing that he mentions is the prize, or the reward at the end of the race. So there should be a purpose, there should be a goal in mind. And just as there is a goal or a purpose when you're running, whether it's to run 100 meters, not yards, meters, or 5 kilometers, 20 kilometers. It's a goal that you're obtaining. And so we need to have a goal in our Christian lives. And that's the race we're running. It's really important for us to think about personal goals, to set personal goals, and to ask God to help us to do that. We can also set goals as a fellowship, as a church. We need to have goals that we're aiming towards. Otherwise, no goal, nothing to aim for, well, you're aimless then, right? You have no direction. Perhaps we need to tame a bad temper. Perhaps we need to learn to curb our tongue. Perhaps we want to learn to serve and witness to others more. Perhaps we want to come into a deeper knowledge of Christ and His Word. Or perhaps Perhaps we want to develop a deeper prayer life. Whatever our goals may be, we simply need to set them, to have them. And so it's a matter of being purposeful in our Christian walk, having purpose every day, and not just being aimless. Paul says, I do not run like a man running aimlessly. And another translation says, I do not run uncertainly. Or just, kind of no goal, no aim, just aimlessly going around in circles. We have that expression, like a chicken with its head cut off. I haven't personally ever seen that, thankfully, but it is an expression, and that's really, if we don't have a goal in our Christian life, we'll be a chicken with a head cut off, just sort of running around aimlessly in circles. And same thing in our work, same thing in schooling if we're in school, or personal lives, whatever it may be. We need goals. And any race, if it didn't have a clear finish line, would be kind of ridiculous. Can you imagine lining people up at the starting line and say, run wherever you want, well, where's the finish line? Well, we don't have one today. That's not, like our whole purpose of a race is to reach that goal, that finish line. So we don't just run any old where, we have a goal. At the recent World Track and Field meet, which by the way was in Daegu, where Sean is, in South Korea. So it was kind of exciting to see a few shots of the city of Daegu. People were there watching for the thrill of seeing the runners cross the finish line. That's the exciting thing, seeing them win the prize and obtain the goal and all of that. And one of the big races, the men's, I think it was the 100, the fastest man in the world, the Jamaican fellow, had a false start. Everybody was there to watch that guy win the race, and one of Sean's friends was there, and he said a whole bunch of people just left, literally, when that guy flubbed it up. I thought, wow, like they were so keen to see the fastest man in the world, win the race, that a lot of them were disgusted when that happened. So crossing the finish line is the important thing, isn't it? You don't want to be disqualified. You don't want to not finish the race, and that's the whole key for us in our faith, is to not be disqualified. The wonderful thing with God is, doesn't matter how many false starts we have, how many times we get off track, how many times we, whatever, make an error, we can always get back in the race. Paul says, everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. So this is the second aspect of running a race that applies to our Christian faith, and that is the aspect of training. Runners don't just show up one day for the big race without having trained for it, right? Especially a marathon. Can you imagine if you had never trained for it? You'd be, passing out after the first 5 kilometers. No, they train for the race. They exercise. They get up early in the morning, whether it's raining or foggy or whatever it is outside, and they go out and they train and they train and they train and they train for that big race. And so there's an aspect of training that's involved. And in the same way, if you don't train, if you're slack in your training, you're not going to run a good race. We can't expect that they're going to do well. And so in the same way as Christians, we are daily, really, in a training ground. Hebrews tells us that we are to throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us, and run with perseverance the race marked out for us. And like every day, it's like you're off that starting line again. And the training is the continually working with God and continually reading Scripture, praying, whatever we need to run that race effectively. Runners dress up in sleek, lightweight clothes. I sure know